So welcome back to another episode of Rebuilding the Palisades podcast hosted by DSI. I'm Zach Fagan, and today we have the illustrious Bobby Rees. Welcome, Bobby. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming in
it's my pleasure.
to talk to us.
Yeah,
So principal of Rees Studio.
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you got started in the industry. How did you get started in architecture?
Well, I think it started in a way when I was a kid. I love drawing, designing things, making things. One of my first projects was a sculpture garden that I made in our front yard. My dad was a professor at UCLA, and our family used to hang out in the sculpture garden.
Very cool.
There. And I don't remember doing this, but when I was about 7, there's a picture of me in the front yard with all these scraps of metal and objects that we had laying around that I had sort of planted in the ground and decided to create my own design out there. My mom was a musician, but very interested in the history of art and architecture. And I used to drive around town with her, and she would point out houses she liked and buildings she liked. And that got me curious too.
Very cool.
So I think that was the start of it, really. And I continued to do sort of artistic things, design-related things, through school, and then I majored in design at UCLA.
Very cool.
As an undergraduate. So pretty broad program, anything from graphics to video to textiles to product design. And then UCLA didn't have an undergraduate program in architecture, but they had a graduate program. And so I took some classes there when I was an undergraduate and became more interested. So that was the start of it.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Did you take do you think your mom's influence in architecture influenced the specific styles that you've kind of expressed in your work over the years? Or did you kind of take your own interest in, architectural styles, classical or kind of modern or, Cape Cod, as, the different types of, design that you've gotten into over the years? How did you kind of get into the specific styles that you've really focused on in your career?
Yeah, first of all, good design is good design,
Sure.
no matter what style. And, my mom was interested in history. And so, unless you're talking about more recent history, the styles are what we might call classic or traditional. I've sort of settled on a modern or contemporary style just because I think that design, whether it's in houses or other things, needs to respond to modern life. And that if we're simply sort of regurgitating or repeating an older style, we're not necessarily responding to all the needs of modern life. And that every style that you've seen over the ages that you might consider traditional was at one point a modern design, was at one point innovative. It wouldn't have lasted if it hadn't been. So I think more generally, my parents' influence was in their own endeavors. So my mom is a musician. My dad was a professor and a writer. And I really see the pursuit of architecture in similar ways. There are so many similarities to music. There are these concepts of harmony, unison, dissonance, repetition, pattern in music. I think Goethe called architecture frozen music. There are these kind of similarities. And so I think that just broad influence of being in a musical home influenced me. And I see those connections all the time. And then I also see, I've learned to write a little bit, not as well as my father, but I see the process of architecture similar to writing, in which you start with a big idea, but really the end product is arrived at through just labor and editing and more editing and cutting out the chaff and a well-designed house or building, like a well-written piece of writing, is stripped down and spare and only includes what's essential. I think it was Pascal who had written a letter and said, if I'd had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. With the idea being that something edited or designed looks almost like it was easy to do because it looks like it had to be designed that way.
Right.
And so I think that those sort of broader things are the way that I was influenced by my parents in design.
Very cool. Very cool. That's a great story. What are some of the more notable sources of inspiration for you from a design perspective?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe Le Corbusier, Louis Kahn for sure. His Exeter Library and Salk Institute projects are almost perfect projects to me. More contemporary people like Renzo Piano, David Chipperfield. I like clean, sort of spare, functional, rational architecture myself. I also really love projects that wouldn't necessarily come from my own sort of design sense, whether it's John Lautner from the mid-century or Frank Gehry now, but my own aesthetic is more one of, I would say, kind of ordered, sort of rational thinking in a way. And I think, I can kind of get into that more as we talk about the process of designing
Sure.
and my own sort of philosophy if I have one.
Yeah, right on. Very good. Very good. So just generally speaking, what really inspired your firm? What inspired you to start your own practice and just to get out there?
Yeah. Part of it is just wanting my own voice. I loved working for other people, and I had two great experiences prior to starting my own firm. One with HOK, a big, large firm where we did very large projects, and then with Marmol Radziner, who's a very well-known local firm that does fantastic residential and other projects. And so the opportunity of working with those firms was great. But having my own voice, being able to sort of orchestrate things as kind of the conductor or the director of any given projects is important. I have a lot of goals besides just the simple design aesthetic that comes from our firm, and so it's just nice to be able to have a certain amount of control. Architecture, unlike a lot of artistic endeavors, requires collaboration, requires seating control. I'm not in a studio with a canvas, just in total control of what I'm developing or creating. So having my own firm gives me a little bit more of that than I would otherwise.
Indeed. I would say architecture is, by its nature, one of the more collaborative practices out there, without doubt.
Yeah.
What do you think sets your studio apart from other firms?
We're at once focused on design, but very client focused. We care about what our clients like. We care about budget. We care about schedule. We want a building to be as functional and as technically sound as it is beautiful or compelling or interesting. So I think we try to be, try to serve all needs. Architecture is that to us. It's why I'm interested in it. For a while in my professional career, I wondered if I was in the right field. It's a challenging field. It's got a very long and slow learning curve. There's so much to master and know, and even at my age, there's still so much I don't know. There's more that I don't know than I do know. But I discovered when I started to decide, okay, it's really right for me, and this was maybe a couple decades into my career, it's because I realized that I'm probably a little bit left-brained, a little bit right-brained. And the process of architecture is one in which I'm sort of working both sides of my brain, that I have to solve aesthetic problems at the same time I'm solving very technical, practical problems. And sometimes those come to head. And that's what makes the process challenging, but also really rewarding. Like if I can do both in a project, that's when I think a project's successful. And I think that helps us be really client-centered. Because to me, a project is a failure if it doesn't function.
Sure, absolutely.
And doesn't serve the client.
Yeah. You think there are firms that are really so proud of what they do that they just don't listen to their clients?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but there are times when I just want to just get rid of clients and design something all by myself. We did this a couple of years ago with my own home. Of course, my wife and I were sort of our own clients too, and it's not like I could be completely alone in making decisions. So I understand the desire to just sort of have total control. But I guess just personality wise, I can't, I care too much about what people think about me. I wouldn't want a client to feel like I didn't care about them. And so I can't, give into that impulse to have total control. And I do feel like, it is a collaborative process, and if it's done well, the collaboration is actually a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of why we do what we do, right?
Yeah.
Is to collaborate with other people. And I don't know about you, but I like collaborating with new people and hearing their ideas and getting those challenges and rising up to meet those challenges.
Yep.
It would be boring if we went to work every day and everything was just easy. I don't know. I welcome the challenge.
Yeah.
So
Likewise.
So do you think you can describe the Rees Studio design aesthetic in just a few words?
Yeah. I thought about that a lot. It's hard to pick just a few words, but I can give you a few and then explain why those words mean something. And I think, order, function, balance are all three words that are important to me. Balance in the sense not only of aesthetic balance, but the balance between things that are often in tension. And that can be on the aesthetic side of things. I think the balance between symmetry and asymmetry is really interesting. If something is perfectly symmetrical, that can be boring. But setting something off, creating a little bit of asymmetry, that creates interest. Balance between the beauty and the functional, as we discussed. Order, I think, because the world is chaos. And to me, a building should be calming, should create order, should be a refuge from that chaos. And so our designs hopefully achieve some sense of order and sort of create a refuge or a haven for people. That's one reason why I like designing homes, is that that's what they should be for people.
Yeah, for sure.
And then function, I mentioned that earlier. A house can't, or any work of architecture to me, unless it's simply an architectural folly, which doesn't have to be functional, isn't successful if it doesn't work. And so that's just really, really important to me. I don't know if that describes it enough.
It does. Yeah. It absolutely does. And, I agree. If it doesn't matter how beautiful something is or how good it looks, if it doesn't actually perform the function that it was intended to perform, then what good is it?
Yeah.
The rooms are too small, the hallways are too tight, et cetera.
The irony of this process for us is that to create a home or a space or series of spaces that are sort of, as I say, calming, sort of a little bit stripped down, is that the process to get there is stressful.
For sure.
When you strip away ornament, when you try to create a calming sort of environment, it takes more effort. So it was just sort of interesting to me in the process of designing our own home, for example, to have created something I think works on that level, and that people come in and feel like it's a very calm space. It took more work to get there and more stress to get there. It's worth it to me, but it's just ironic that that's what it takes to get to that point.
Yeah. And appears on the surface as though it was easy to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah, exactly.
look how simple it is. It must have been easy to get here, but it's much to the converse. Right.
Right.
I haven't really thought about it so much in that way, but now that you bring up, you really shine a light on that point. You're absolutely right. It's the time in refining something and taking away the things that just really aren't essential, and only leaving the things in which are critical,
Right.
right? So is there, like what you would call a pivotal moment in your career, or a career defining project that, more or less defined
Yeah.
who you are as
Yeah.
an architect, or defined your studio?
Well, I'd first say that we're still being defined. I'm older. I'm sort of toward more the end of my career than beginning of my career, but I still feel like I have so much to learn and so much to express, um, that I'm not still fully defined as an architect. I don't think there's any one project that's done it for me. I think there are a series of sort of pivotal projects. At my first firm, I was a design member on the Long Beach Aquarium, and that was a really fun project and a very complex project with a huge team of consultants. And so that was really an interesting way to sort of understanding the complexity of architecture, the required coordination between trades, and so that was, I think, one pivotal project. When I was at Marmor Diener, I worked with Tree People, an LA-based organization, and for several years worked with them. And that was really pivotal in the sense that I already had this very strong interest in sustainable design. I'm a LEED accredited professional. From a young age, my mom, one of her interests was ecology and sustainability, and so that sort of passed along to me. And so, being able to actually work with an organization whose focus that was a great experience, and to be able in practice to create buildings that really sort of address all sorts of climatic and sustainable issues was really important. I think then more recently, just being able to design and build my own home, being able to sort of experiment a little bit, do some things that I wouldn't try on a client.
Right. Yeah.
Some of those things that I wouldn't try again on myself.
Right. Sure.
But I think good architecture you need to take chances once in a while, and then just the process of really being involved in the project. I was the owner builder, so supervising every part of construction, and I like to work with my hands. So, I did some rough framing, I did some finished carpentry, I did some drywall work. I swept the house at the end of the day, and so that sort of level of intimacy with the construction process was really instructive too.
No doubt. No doubt. Did Back to Tree People for a second. Did you work on the buildings off of Coldwater?
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah. We had designed a sort of a three-structure campus. The main conference building is the one that got built, along with a 250,000-gallon cistern that's underground that a lot of people don't know is there. Fantastic project, great organization. Their relationship with the city made permitting possible in an instance at which it might have been very, very difficult.
Love it. We talked about collaboration and how, architecture is a very, by its nature, a very collaborative business.
Yeah.
You've got interior designers, you've got general contractors, you've got all these trades. How do you really approach, or let me rephrase that. Do you have a specific approach to collaboration in your practice? Is there anything specific with regard to the way that you approach collaborating with large groups of people that's, maybe influenced by your work with, Marmol and others on these bigger projects, or,
Yeah.
kind of how do you approach, collaboration these days?
It's valuing it as a process and knowing that it's an important part of the process. It's knowing, that you have to be organized, that you have to value other people's expertise. I've learned a lot. As I said earlier, there's still so much to learn, and we can't, as architects, be masters of every part of the building trade.
Right.
So knowing that an interior designer, a builder, other consultants have an expertise themselves, and trying to draw on that. At the same time, you have to be a good sort of director or conductor. Any built projects like the team is like a symphony orchestra or a production company for a movie. Somebody has to direct things and keep things focused. And so it's making sure that people aren't just kind of going off on their own and making their own decisions. And this is one of the things we really try to convey to contractors. Many contractors are kind of used to kind of letting their subs just do their own thing, and we try to teach them too. You're a director here. You're producing this thing. You need to orchestrate this and make sure that you're seeing the whole project. You have control over it, and that's part of the best part of collaboration is knowing when to do that.
Sure. Well, I'd love to hear what you said about letting professionals basically be professionals, right? They've spent a lifetime in their trade.
Yeah.
Kind of let them do their thing. There has to be someone directing the whole thing, but that's great to hear. We don't always get that kind of, I wouldn't say benefit of the doubt, but in some cases there are stakeholders that kind of think they can do what we could do better. And it's like, well, what are we doing here? Or are we working together? So it's really good to hear that.
You have to be able to put your ego aside. You just have to. I mean, whether it's architecture or any other endeavor, we all have egos. We all want to be right.
Yeah, of course.
But I think that's been easier for me, honestly, as I get older, because you do realize that you're never going to know it all.
Yeah, for sure. No, I feel the same way. It's always good, to meet someone that is very successful in their craft, but is able to kind of put that part aside and just let's do the best job that we can here.
Yeah.
Discover why we're the most awarded home technology firm in the U.S. Our design-centric approach transforms your space with effortless control of lighting, motorized shades, audio, video, and more. Our friendly experts guide you every step of the way, no tech speak, just smart, stunning simplicity. We provide years of care from our award-winning service and support team. Experience technology that feels as good as it looks.
So kind of shifting gears to the Palisades a bit, as a local architect, how has your relationship with the Palisades kind of shaped your approach to building?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm basically a lifelong Angelino. My parents were born in the LA area in the 30s. They went off to graduate school, and so I was born in the Midwest, but my dad got a teaching job at UCLA when I was 3 years old. So, I basically grown up on the West Side. So it feels like home to me, the Palisades. I grew up with friends in the Palisades. I have close friends now who live in the Palisades who've lost their homes. I spent time in the Palisades. When I was a design student at UCLA in a video class, I did a video on the history of the Palisades, in part because of the architecture there. One of my favorite projects ever is the Eames House, which, thank goodness, survived the fires. So I just have a real personal interest in that area, just riding bikes, hiking trails, being up above the Palisades, having clients in the Highlands as well as the rest of the Palisades. I've just spent a lot of time there. When I was in high school, we used to run our cross-country meets at Will Rogers. So seeing that house be destroyed by the fire was also devastating. So it just feels very personal to me. It's a place I've always cared about. And then just having current friends and clients who've lost their homes matters.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. Has the fire changed your conversations with clients, with regard to, lifestyle, safety, aesthetics?
Yeah, we're obviously more focused now on fire-resistant construction. You know, we were before, but more so now, especially on things sort of beyond the building itself, defensible space, landscaping, all that stuff just matters more, and we're focused more on it. So every new project is really addressing those issues more than ever before. Um, our clients are sort of more focused on what's important now to them. They've realized that, you know, what was saved was what mattered most, was themselves, their family, and their memories. So we can focus on, you know, the building and how it can sort of last into the future, both in terms of its responsiveness to things like fires, but also just its function. And a devastating event like this really allows people to focus more on what matters. So that's what the conversation's about. I think it's really, I think a lot of people tend to overbuild. There's such an emphasis on cost per square foot and maximizing square footage on any one lot. And I think what a lot of people have realized is that they don't necessarily need a big home. And whether it's just the reality of the fire and focusing on what matters to them, or knowing that they have limited insurance coverage, or that, their family life is different than it was. Their kids have moved out,
Sure.
So we're looking at building smaller homes in some cases. And I think that's good.
Sure.
It allows for higher quality sometimes. Because if you're building a smaller home with the same budget, you can build a nicer home.
Without doubt. Without doubt. Yeah. I mean, there's one example I think's, applicable here. It was in Pebble Beach, but I think, and I've been in a lot of homes in LA and Beverly Hills and Beverly Park and Malibu and all that. This home I went in Pebble Beach wasn't very big, maybe 3,000 square feet or so. It's a decent sized home, older retired couple that lived there. I remember every detail about that home being epic from the driveway and the stone pavers that made up the walk to the front door, to the door handle, to the door itself, the hardware on the door, the interior, the cabinets, everything. It was higher quality, and you could feel the quality, and I think that really speaks to your point about if you got a certain budget and you build something smaller, you really can get a lot higher quality. So yeah.
And if you design it well, the house is going to feel bigger than it is.
Right.
Especially with our benign climate in Southern California and the opportunity to integrate indoor and outdoor space, you can build a smaller house that feels a lot larger than it is.
Sure. Yeah, with
This
glass.
space itself costs nothing.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that hard to create space that's functional but doesn't cost a lot.
Sure. No, that's a great point. What do you think have been some of the biggest, logistical or emotional challenges in just working with clients that have been affected by the fire?
I think the emotional challenge for them is the devastation of the fire and the effect of that on their psyche. And do I want to live in a area that's a high fire hazard severity zone again? Do I want to live in a neighborhood where a lot of the people I cared for can't move back? The Palisades had a pretty diverse, set of inhabitants, from people who were first-time owners from the mid-century to newer arrivals. And, do I want to build quickly because inflation's going to hit at some point, and if I build sooner, it'll cost me less, but then be one of the first ones back in, or have to live in a construction zone? There are all these emotions that affect the decisions that our clients have. That's more secondhand for us. We sort of approach things the way they want to and kind of try to address their needs as they come up. So it's less sort of a less emotional for us, and just sort of try and deal with things practically based on their needs. A lot of the sort of addressing the more practical issues of rebuilding after a fire. Some of it's not that difficult. It's just making sure that we're being more fire safe in our decisions and the choice of materials and the type of detailing. That's come pretty easily. It's been a little challenging sort of trying to understand how the city's going to respond to certain things. We aren't going to be able to permit things the way we did before. And so the city's had to make certain decisions. Some of those have been good decisions, simplifying the process, especially in like-for-like rebuilding. And I think the state and the city have done a good job generally in that way. But not everybody can rebuild like-for-like. We have these great clients. We were in the process of designing something for them. They own a house in the Palisades neighborhood. And we had just finished a 2-year process where we designed a pretty major addition to a mid-century house, single-story mid-century house. The house wasn't a landmark by any means. It was a sort of a modest mid-century house, but we couldn't really afford to tear it down and start over ground up. So we kept this single-story mid-century house, designed a 2-story with a garage below addition to it, got through the HOA, and on the Friday after the fires, we were scheduled basically to pull the permit. And our clients were on vacation in the Philippines and saw their home go up in flames on their Ring camera. And, if we had designed a ground up project, we would have just sort of taken a step back, and if the finances and insurance had made sense, been able to just proceed with it. Well, we couldn't build like for like. It made no sense to try to create that single-story mid-century house. And I've just found that, this can't be a like-for-like rebuild. That's fine. We're going to still build according to current code. But the city seems to have sort of emphasized a little bit more like-for-like rebuilding. And our clients shouldn't be penalized because they can't do that in practicality. So the city also, quite honestly, took 3 months to come up with a plan in which some of the guidelines were sort of at complete odds with what we were first told, specifically regarding the prevailing setback rule. I won't get into the detail of that, but whereas most of the decisions I think have been made to help facilitate rebuilding, that's one that actually not only penalizes people unfairly, but also could have a negative impact on the whole community, whether they are impacted directly by the prevailing setback rule or not. So that's something personally I've been trying to kind of push through, expediting companies we know, through connections we have through nonprofits and through the council office. We haven't been able to turn it around yet, but that's one of the challenges we faced.
Wow. Sounds complicated. So how do you think you're balancing, the preservation of the charm, kind of uniqueness of architecture in the Palisades with this kind of push toward a more resilient, functionality?
Yeah. Well, I think resilient architecture can be charming. That's part of it. Just as modern architecture can be warm.
Right.
There's this idea that modern architecture is cold because people have seen a few architectural houses that are only made of concrete, stone, and glass, and that defines modern architecture. Modern architecture can be just as warm and inviting as traditional architecture. I think scale matters. So the fact that a lot of people will be rebuilding smaller houses will help with that. If the entire rebuild process was left to developers, then that might not be the case. And it's not that developers have bad intentions, but one of their goals is to make a profit on their projects. And so if a bunch of, if 2-story buildings that maxed out the RFA everywhere were built, then the Palisades would lose its charm. I do think we have to be careful about rebuilding traditional homes. I like variety, and a variety of modern and traditional is great, but traditional homes, in some cases, had features that made them less than fire safe.
Sure.
And I think it's, we've all seen poorly built, poorly designed buildings that are meant to mimic a certain style. So I think it just takes a certain amount of sensitivity to redesign and redetail a house that's of a certain style, of a certain period, but is also fire safe. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, for sure.
But I would also say that one last thing: good design, repeated good design, is more important than variety. As much as I love variety, if we have really well designed houses and they're repeated here and there, that will be more important and better, creating an overall well designed neighborhood that has style and character. Here's an example, a couple. Gregory Ain, a mid-century architect, did a tract in Mar Vista, where I live, and a tract in Altadena that were basically essentially the same homes repeated over and over. Those two tracts have tons of charm. The houses are undersized but always sell for over market. They were designed with landscaping done at the same time, so they're really well landscaped. So the fact that those homes are repeated does not decrease the charm of the neighborhood. Eichler homes are another example of that. There are many Eichler tracts in California, and they're always desirable, even though the homes have a sort of repeated quality to them and design to them. So I think the Case Study 2.0 program has 50 architects. That's great. That creates a lot of variety. But if a bunch of those architects have many of their own homes repeated in several instances, that's okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great statement, that, not variety just for the sake of variety, right? No, I totally get it. Yeah, I think everyone is approaching the kind of charm and architectural, soul of the Palisades a little bit differently. But, to your point about, the case study effort, there's a lot of variety there built in, right?
Sure.
And, I think I was going to ask you about your case study design.
Sure.
A little bit as well. We'll get to that in a second, but, it's, I guess I don't know how I was going to phrase it, but, with 50 architects and the variations, I think, that are available in those designs.
Yeah.
And I know there's not a lot of variation because the point is to kind of, here's the design, right? And be able to get that permitted without a lot of, the more options, the more, complicated the permitting becomes.
Right.
But given there is that much variety from the design side of things, it's almost guaranteed that we're going to get a different Palisades. There's no two ways about that. I think everyone agrees that Palisades 2.0, right?
Yeah.
will be a different community in every sense of the word. It'll be a different group of people. It will be different from a design perspective. It'll be a different, the whole thing is just going to be new and different. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
What we're really talking about is, how different is it going to be, right? But given the variety and the stakeholders that are involved, and the desire that everyone has to, respect that, kind of architectural soul, I think it's going to come out good. So I'm not worried about that, but it's always interesting to get, a kind of an additional perspective on what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Everyone that we've spoken to so far has a slightly different take, but there's also kind of a line, I think, that you can draw through all these conversations where all the pros in the architectural, design build community generally agree, it's going to take a while, We've kind of accepted that it's going to be a decade or two effort, and that it's going to be different. There's no way we could build it back just exactly like it was, no matter how much we may kind of be emotionally attached to what was there.
Yep.
It isn't going to come back just like that.
We can't recreate it exactly as it was.
Right.
It will lose a little something.
Yeah.
What it was meant something to people and is sort of seared into their memories. And so there will be something lost no matter what. But I think we can do certain things better. I think it will take time. Landscaping is one thing besides the buildings that needs to be addressed.
I know. I was going to bring up the trees as well. How many of these beautiful trees are going to get, cut down or taken out of there, and how long are they going to take to grow back? And that's a great point. If you want to riff on the landscaping side of things, that's a topic we actually really haven't talked a lot about.
Well, this is another great opportunity to actually do better. We were used to sort of planting just about any type of plant here or there. And in our firm, we've been focused really on trying to use drought tolerant native plants. Now there's a real reason to do that. And to, in doing that, create, more fire safe properties and sites, and to create more drought tolerant areas. So this is a great opportunity. It's just something that's going to take time. Mature plants take time to grow.
Absolutely.
And or cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you want to, plant a mature tree.
Yeah.
But I think that it's just a great opportunity to make the entire area not only fire safe, but more water sensitive and more beautiful.
Speaking of water, just generally water storage, knowing that you were involved with that giant cistern off of Coldwater Canyon, I saw right after the fires, I went to visit a client whose house didn't burn, but had smoke damage, and they're going to have to gut the whole thing and the whole deal. He's way up at the top. And from his home in the backyard, you can look down and see that big water storage,
Right.
quarter, 500,000, million gallon, whatever it was, water storage that was empty, that they were doing maintenance on or whatever. And I want to say he mentioned that the maintenance was actually on this like cover that was put in place after 9/11, when the government was worried about water storage being polluted
Right.
by like bad actors or something like
Right,
that, which seems at this point kind of outdated. Do we really need to worry about that type of thing? I don't know. I'm not an expert on that stuff, but that's large water storage that was empty. And in my travels around the world, I've been to, Mexico and other places where, the Mayans, for example, built these relatively sophisticated forms of water storage where they would dig a big hole, they'd line it with rock and cement. As it got up toward the top, it kind of naturally caved in, and then they had a hole, and then it kind of was lined where when water would fall, it would naturally go in, and they would always have water.
Yeah.
And it seems like, now they didn't build anything that was 250,000 gallons, all right? But it seems like we're really missing an opportunity whenever it rains to really catch all of the water that we possibly can. And that's important, of course, in super fire prone areas that are the topic of discussion. So is there do you have any ideas about rainwater catchment and storage that might be applicable in not only the Palisades, but all over California and the Southwest, where wildfire is a major concern, right? So we're not talking about going and grabbing water from an aquifer.
Right.
We're talking about naturally saving rainwater for, a day when we really need it, and storing it.
Right. Well, we do that already. There's a low impact development program where we minimize the impact of rainwater on any given site. So in a lot of cases, there are different ways to do that, from on-site filtration to what we call planter boxes, to rain barrels. And so we do that already with rain barrels, and we capture that water, and usually it's used for irrigation. Now, we could also do that for fire suppression. One of the challenges in Southern California is we actually have a fair amount of rain, from year to year, but it's all concentrated in a very short period of time. So often that water that we collect is gone by a certain point in the year. So there's some cost to it, but if people care enough, we can create cisterns, either above ground tanks or underground cisterns. There's a cost to that. There's some health issues potentially with stored water, pumping water. That's all possible. We can use pools as reservoirs, and we've had some initial discussions with clients about whether or not they want to go beyond simply interior fire sprinklers and fire safe materials and construction to actual active fire suppression systems to protect their homes. I think that's open to anybody who's interested in doing that. It's not something we know a lot about yet.
Sure. Very cool. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to the conversation, or any message that you want to bring to, our audience?
Sure. A few things, if there's time.
There is time.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, one is that, from a design standpoint and an architectural standpoint, the case study program is one part of an incredible history in Los Angeles. I don't think there's a city in the world that compares with Los Angeles as far as 20th century residential architecture goes. From Green and Green to Irving Gill to Frank Lloyd Wright to mid-century architects like Rudolf Schindler, Richard Neutra, John Lautner, to more contemporary people. The history of residential architecture in Los Angeles is unsurpassed, and we need to meet that standard in rebuilding in the Palisades. It's a great opportunity. Homes in Los Angeles are examples across the, have been influential across the world. And the properties that we're redeveloping are worth so much money. The dirt is worth so much money. Let's invest in the buildings that sit on that dirt. They don't have to be big. They can be simple, but let's make the design and architecture worthy of the beautiful place that we live in. So that's one message I would try to convey. Another is that we need to find a new way to build. Almost everything we've ever done is a one-off. There's the R&D isn't in the project itself; it's in similar projects we've done before, and we love doing, custom designed homes for our clients. But we don't buy products that way generally. We all buy the same cars as other people. We all buy the same clothes. We all buy the same shoes, the same computers. These are very personal choices. And yet we're not offended if somebody is wearing something that's similar to ours, or if somebody's driving the same car. We need to be able to build homes that can be repeated and built less expensively. And our project for the case study is our attempt to do that. We call it the Now House, NOU. NOU, it means new in a couple of different languages. And of course, it's the phonetic spelling for now. We want it to be current. And the design is evocative of mid-century architecture kind of on purpose. And it's also built in the same sort of spirit of being repeatable and being modular, and the entire structural system for the house is based on a system called SIPs, structural insulated panels, and the entire design is on a 4-foot by 4-foot grid, and all of the building components are meant to be modular and built quickly. So instead of 3-coat stucco that's messy and takes a lot of time, we're using metal siding that can go up quickly. We know that there will be a huge demand for materials and labor when the building gets intense. Material demand can be spread out. there are places outside of Southern California, outside of the state, outside of the country where we can draw on materials. Labor will be finite. There are only so many laborers that can live in Southern California and work on these homes. So our house is designed like a kit of parts. And it's sort of, we've tried to make it a bridge between custom homes that are built stick by stick and factory built prefab homes that have their own issues and their own challenges and aren't necessarily as cost effective or as suitable to certain sites as we think our house is. So this is kind of a bridge between the two, and an idea that it's a kit of parts home that can be built more quickly, and that the more we build, the cheaper we'll be able to build them, the more we'll work out the kinks, and we aren't just doing one-offs over and over. And so that's one of our goals in designing this house and in encouraging others to do similar things.
Similar. I'm glad to hear that, because I've always, having gotten into the construction business when I was, in my early teens, 14 or 15 years old, I saw the waste right away. And it continues to pain me when I see that big roll off get carted away, and it's got, all kinds of material in it that could have been utilized better, probably. Never mind all the travel back and forth for all the crew to go there and to work on the house. The travel just to and from the site adds up in terms of energy and carbon footprint and all of the rest. Never mind, it's just not as efficient to do it on site than it is to do it in a factory,
right?
At least partially in a factory. Right. So really glad to hear that's your approach with regard to your case study design. Well, this has been a great conversation.
I appreciate it.
I really, likewise. Thank you for coming in again. And, looking forward to, learning more about your design, and hoping to see some of them start to pop up.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you have, gotten this podcast off the ground and are getting the word out. It's really important that we continue the conversation. There's so many people, making individual efforts to try to help, and a broader communication in which information shared is really important. So this is important part of that process.
Love it. Well, we're doing our part on the technology side to, put that layer on all the case study projects, So, looking forward to collaborating with everyone on the team and being a part of it.
Great. Thank you.
All right.